My beloved brothers and sisters, let me begin with a question. Have you ever walked away from an argument not because you were defeated, but because you valued your peace more than your pride? In a world where voices are constantly raised and opinions shouted from every corner, where every disagreement turns into a debate and every conversation becomes a contest, silence is no longer seen as strength, it is mistaken for weakness. But the truth, dear brothers and sisters, is that silence, when chosen with wisdom, is one of the most powerful tools a believer can hold. Every single day we are faced with situations that test our patience, our character, and our ability to remain composed. Sometimes these tests come in the form of words thrown at us, hurtful words, false accusations, sarcastic comments, unnecessary criticism. And in those moments, what we choose to say or not say can determine the course of not just our day, but our peace, our relationships, and even our hereafter. It is in these moments that silence becomes more than just a pause in speech. It becomes a statement, a powerful act of restraint, a form of worship, a shield. Your silence today may be your protection tomorrow. That is not just a poetic line, it is a life-saving principle. How many times have people spoken in anger or haste only to regret it later? How many arguments were prolonged because someone couldn't hold back a single word? How many friendships were broken, marriages destroyed, families torn apart not by actions but by words? And then how many people found themselves wishing they had simply remained silent? How many found themselves in difficulty, not because they didn't speak, but because they did? The reality is that every word we utter is recorded. Every statement becomes part of our story. Sometimes people try to provoke us, they want to drag us into their chaos, their drama, their anger. And the moment you respond, you've already stepped into their battlefield. But when you remain silent, when you walk away without lowering yourself, that silence becomes your strength. You don't need to win every argument, you don't need to prove your point to every person, because when your heart is at peace with your Lord, you do not crave the validation of the people. There are times when you are completely right, when you are being wronged, but you remain silent, not because you don't know how to speak, not because you don't have proof, but because you know that your silence places your matter in the hands of the one who never sleeps, who never forgets, who never delays justice. Your silence is not weakness. It is a loud declaration that you trust your Lord more than your own voice. When we read the stories of the righteous before us, we find that many of them endured severe trials, accusations, and slander, yet they chose silence over confrontation. Why? Because they understood that not all battles are meant to be fought with words. Some are fought with patience, some are won through character, some are left to the Lord of the worlds to settle. There are people who speak about you behind your back, let them. The angels are writing. There are people who judge you based on one moment, one mistake, one misunderstanding, let them. Your Creator knows your heart. There are people who twist your silence into guilt, let them. You are not accountable for what others assume, you are only accountable for what you say and do. When a person wrongs you, the natural reaction is to respond, to clarify, to defend, to explain. But ask yourself, is it worth it? Will your response bring peace or more confusion? Will it resolve the matter or add fuel to the fire? Sometimes silence is more effective than 1,000 words. It teaches, it stuns, it diffuses. And most importantly, it protects you from sin, from pride, from regret. When someone shouts at you, insults you, and you remain calm, they expect a reaction. When it doesn't come, they are left with their own noise. Your silence reflects your strength. You have chosen not to lower yourself. You have chosen not to let their words control your mood, your peace, your soul. That is not just maturity, it is strength of the highest order. There are moments in life when silence becomes your best friend. When you are too hurt to speak, too wise to argue, too tired to explain. In those moments, allow your silence to do what your words cannot. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to say nothing and let your character speak, let your patience shine, let your dignity do the talking. Our time on this earth is limited. Our energy is precious. Why waste it trying to explain yourself to those who are committed to misunderstanding you? Why lose your peace trying to win a debate that brings no benefit? Your silence may not be understood today, but tomorrow, when the truth becomes clear, when the dust settles, your silence will stand as a mark of your strength. And those who once mocked your quietness will admire your self-control. Many of us carry the scars of words spoken to us in anger, parents to children, spouses to one another, friends, colleagues, and those words, though they only took seconds to say, took years to heal. If only we knew the power of silence in such moments. Silence would have saved us from wounds. Silence would have saved us from guilt. Silence would have saved our relationships. Think about it. How many times have you wished you had stayed silent in anger, in frustration, in jealousy, in pride? How many times did you wish you had paused, reflected, and just walked away? That is why we must train ourselves. Silence is not automaticity, is a discipline. It requires self-awareness, it requires humility, it requires wisdom. We must learn that not every moment demands our voice. Not every thought deserves to be shared. Not every opinion needs to be heard. There is power in knowing when to speak, and greater power in knowing when not to. The one who learns this has already won half of life's battles. And now, my dear brothers and sisters, reflect on this. Not every battle requires your voice. Some are won with patience. Life is not a series of arguments to be won. Life is a journey of growth, of service, of peace. What benefit is there in winning a debate if you lose a relationship? What benefit is there in silencing someone else with your voice if you lose your own inner calm? Sometimes walking away is not giving up, it is rising above. Our ego often tricks us into believing that if we stay silent, we are being weak. But in reality, silence requires more strength than shouting ever will. The strongest people are not those who speak the loudest, but those who speak the wisest stand. Sometimes that wisdom tells them, say nothing. A person once said something beautiful. If you speak when you're angry, you'll make the best speech you'll ever regret. Think about that. How often do we say things in the heat of the moment and then spend days, months, or even years trying to undo the damage? Words once spoken cannot be taken back, but silence? Silence never needs apology. It never requires repair. When you respond to every provocation, you make yourself vulnerable. But when you stay silent, you remain in control. Silence keeps you calm. Silence keeps you focused. Silence keeps you protected. People will wonder what you're thinking. They may assume wrongly, but your silence will shield you from sin, from arguments, from unnecessary drama. There's a time to speak. Yes, but that speech must be meaningful. It must be rooted in benefit. Speak when your words can heal, guide, uplift, clarify, protect. Speak when your silence may lead to injustice. But when speaking adds no value, or when it may spark harm, it is better to remain silent and leave the matter to the one who sees everything. Imagine two people arguing in public. One is shouting, pointing fingers, blaming. The other is calm, composed, silent. Who looks stronger? Who looks wiser? Who holds the dignity? The one who is silent. Because strength is not in how loud your voice is, it's in how deep your peace is. There's something deeply spiritual about silence. It teaches you reliance. It teaches you trust. It makes you reflect. Sometimes we speak too quickly because we fear people will misunderstand us. But if your intention is clear, if your heart is clean, if your Lord is pleased, then let them misunderstand, let them assume, let them talk, because He knows, and that's enough. There are moments when silence is louder than any argument. It is more powerful than any comeback. It is more graceful than any statement. You don't always need to tell people who you are. Your character, your consistency, your silence in the face of chaos will tell your story far better than your words ever could. And sometimes silence is not just about avoiding conflict, it's about creating space for understanding. When someone is angry, emotional, or unreasonable, your silence can be the pause that prevents escalation. It can give them room to calm down, to reflect, to return to a place of reason. You don't have to match their energy, you just have to hold yours. Silence also gives us the ability to listen. And when we listen, we learn, we grow, we understand. A person who always speaks rarely hears, but the one who listens gains perspective. Silence allows you to absorb, to see the bigger picture, to respond with wisdom rather than reaction. One of the most overlooked qualities in life today is silence. Not the kind of silence that stems from fear or oppression, but the kind that comes from wisdom, strength, and a connection to your Creator. In a world that pushes us to speak quickly, argue loudly, and express every emotion without reflection, silence has become a rare treasure. And yet, it is one of the clearest signs that a person understands their purpose and has disciplined their heart. Because the one who has tamed their heart automatically tames their tongue. When the heart is filled with the remembrance of the Almighty, it doesn't feel the need to constantly be heard. It doesn't rush to respond to every insult, every opinion, every conversation. It learns to value silence not as emptiness, but as a place of deep reflection and connection. A tongue under control is not just a sign of good manners, it is a mirror of the soul. When you see someone who speaks with wisdom, who knows when to pause, when to remain quiet, when to choose their words carefully, you are witnessing someone who has worked on their heart. Because the tongue is merely the translator of what lies within. A corrupted heart will produce reckless words, sarcasm, lies, and harsh speech. But a clean heart, a heart that remembers the Almighty often, a heart that is conscious of accountability, will never allow the tongue to run wild. Think of how many times we speak without thinking. A small comment, a rude remark, a joke taken too far, a backbiting sentence, and yet these words, no matter how small they feel in the moment, are written and recorded. They carry consequences. The person who controls their speech is someone who understands the weight of their words. They don't speak unless they know there's benefit. They don't joke if it risks hurting someone's feelings. They don't respond to every criticism, because their validation comes from their relationship with their Lord, not the approval of people. When the tongue is left unchecked, it can destroy everything. Families have broken due to words. Marriages have collapsed due to uncontrolled speech. Friendships have ended because someone didn't think before they spoke. And yet the opposite is true relationships have been healed by kind words, a sincere apology, a soft tone. The same tongue that can destroy also has the power to build, to uplift, to soothe. So the question we must ask ourselves is, are we using our tongues to please the Almighty or to please our egos? The one who is conscious of the Almighty doesn't just think about what they say, they think about how they say it, when they say it, and why they say it. Sometimes the truth must be spoken, yes, but even truth without wisdom becomes a weapon. A wise person knows how to deliver truth with mercy. They choose silence when words may cause harm. They refrain from speaking even when they have the perfect comeback, because they know that silence can be more powerful than speech. When you sit with the righteous, you'll notice something amazing. They speak less, but their words carry more. They don't fill the space with idle chatter. They reflect before responding. They weigh their words carefully. Why? Because they've disciplined their souls. They understand that every word is either for them or against them. They choose to speak when it brings goodness and remain silent when there's no benefit. That's not weakness, that's spiritual maturity. Sometimes people believe that silence means you have nothing to say. But in reality, silence often means you're thinking deeply. It means you're giving the moment its due respect. It means you value the listener. And more than anything, it means you value your own peace. Not everything needs a reaction. Not every comment needs a reply. Not every insult deserves your voice. When your heart is at peace, you don't seek to win every debate. You seek to win the pleasure of your Lord. Silence can be a means of worship. It can protect you from backbiting. It can save you from lying. It can prevent unnecessary arguments. It can shield you from arrogance. And it allows you the space to engage in remembrance instead. A person who chooses silence often fills that space with reflection, with gratitude, with prayer. Their heart begins to absorb peace. And that peace is visible in how they carry themselves, how they speak, and how they treat others. And remember, when the heart is connected to the Almighty, it finds no pleasure in hurting other seven through words. It finds no joy in gossip, no delight in slander, no satisfaction in putting people down. Instead, it becomes a heart that carries others, that speaks with kindness, that uplifts through speech. And when that isn't possible, it chooses silence over harm. Silence is not absence, it's presence. It's being fully aware of what matters most. It's realizing that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to remain quiet and let your actions speak for you. You don't have to defend yourself in every situation. You don't have to explain your choices to everyone. When you know your Lord is your witness, your silence becomes your strength. It becomes your dua. It becomes your shield. Let's take a moment to understand something even deeper. The wise speak because they have something to say. The rest speak just to be heard. We live in a world where speaking has become easier than ever. Social media gives everyone a platform, everyone a voice, everyone a space to express, but that has come with a cost. People now speak not because they have knowledge, not because they want to benefit others, but simply to be seen and heard. They seek likes, applause, validation. They rush to comment, to react, to argue, to give their opinion, often without any reflection, without knowledge, without wisdom. But the believer doesn't speak just for the sake of speaking. The believer speaks because they have something meaningful to say. And if they don't, they remain silent. That's not weakness, it's strength. It's intelligence. It's sincerity. It's understanding that every word counts, that your voice is a trust, that your speech is an opportunity either to draw closer to your Lord or to move further away. Think of the Prophet's teaching. She didn't fill every moment with words. When he spoke, his words were counted. They were clear. They were wise. He didn't interrupt. He didn't mock. He didn't waste his voice. His silence had meaning. His speech had weight. And those around him felt honored simply by his presence, not just his speech. That is the example we strive for, not the loudest voice in the room, but the most sincere one. Sometimes we confuse confidence with volume. We think that the one who speaks the most must know the most, but often it's the opposite. The one who speaks the least is the one who listens, who reflects, who learns. They don't rush to reply. They ask questions, they observe, they grow in understanding. And when they do speak, their words touch hearts because they come from a place of depth. We must also recognize the difference between speech that benefits and speech that merely entertains. There's nothing wrong with light conversation, with laughter, with warmth. But if our tongues are constantly engaged in meaningless talk, where is the room for remembrance? Where is the room for knowledge? Where is the space for reflection? A wise person balances their speech. They bring joy without harming others. They bring wisdom without arrogance. And when they have nothing beneficial to say, they remain silent with grace. Many people today speak not from knowledge but from ego. They speak to win arguments, not to seek truth. They raise their voices not to clarify but to dominate. But what value is there in winning a debate if you lose your character? What value is there in proving someone wrong if you break their heart in the process? True wisdom is knowing when to speak, how to speak, and when not to speak at all. Our tongues can either be our greatest asset or our greatest liability, and the difference lies in how we use them. A word spoken with wisdom can guide a person back to the right path. A word spoken in anger can destroy someone's confidence for years. A word spoken with love can mend a broken relationship. A word spoken in pride can push someone away from faith. That is why the righteous are always careful with their words. They fear their words more than they fear their enemies, because words are permanent. Once spoken, they cannot be taken back. And the wise don't just choose their words, they choose their silences. Sometimes the most impactful moment in a conversation is the pause, the moment when you don't respond, the moment when you let someone finish without interruption, the moment when you hold your tongue not out of fear, but out of compassion, out of mercy. That silence speaks volumes. It says, I'm listening. It says, I'm thinking. It says, I care. Let us train ourselves to become people of depth, not just noise. People of meaning, not just words. Let us strive to have hearts so connected to our Lord that our tongues reflect that connection in every sentence, every conversation, every silence. Let us be among those whose words are remembered for their wisdom and whose silences are respected for their dignity. Because the wise don't speak for attention, they speak for benefit. And when that benefit is absent, they know that silence is far more valuable. They understand that the best speech is the one that brings others closer to goodness, and the best silence is the one that protects you from harm. One of the most powerful gifts that the Almighty has granted us is the ability to control ourselves in the face of provocation. It is a strength far greater than the strength of physical might or loud arguments. In fact, the ability to remain calm, composed, and silent in moments of anger is one of the most noble traits a believer can cultivate. Many people think strength is about shouting louder, arguing harder, proving a point, making sure no one crosses a boundary without a reaction. But true strength lies in mastering your inner self when your emotions are raging, when your heart is pounding, and your mind is flooded with responses you could easily deliver, but you choose to remain silent, not out of weakness, but because you recognize the greater reward. You see, anyone can shout back. Anyone can respond with anger. That takes no special effort. But when you are provoked, insulted, misunderstood, and still you manage to hold back your tongue, lower your gaze, calm your breathing, and walk away with dignity that is true power, that is a sign of spiritual discipline. That is a sign that you have trained your soul to place your Creator above your ego. Because the ego screams for revenge. It demands a response. It insists that you make yourself heard. But the soul that is connected to the Almighty understands that silence in such moments brings reward, brings mercy, brings elevation in the sight of the Most High. How many times have we regretted words spoken in anger? How often have we looked back and wished we had remained silent in that moment when the heart is burning and the desire to respond is so strong? We think our silence would be a defeat. But in reality, it is a victory over Shaitan, who wants to pull you into a cycle of conflict and hatred. And when you choose silence, when you choose to walk away, you are not being cowardly. You are being wise. You are showing that your heart is not enslaved to emotions. You are showing that your inner peace is not for sale. The Prophet taught us that the strong man is not the one who can wrestle another to the ground, but the one who can control himself when angry. That is because controlling anger requires inner strength, discipline, humility, and an awareness that every action we take, every word we say is being recorded. The one who controls their anger, especially when they have the power to retaliate, is someone who is truly conscious of their accountability. They are not looking for worldly victory. They are looking for the pleasure of their Lord. When someone insults you, mocks you, or challenges you, and you remain silent not because you are unsure of what to say, but because you are sure of what the Almighty loves, you are standing on the higher ground. And often, silence in such moments has a greater impact than any speech. It confuses your opponent, it shows maturity, it prevents escalation, and most importantly, it brings peace to your own heart. Because responding to provocation often leaves a bitter taste, even if you feel justified. But silence, when done for the sake of Allah, leaves you with peace, with calm, and with reward. Silence in the face of provocation is not just about holding the tongue. It's about calming the heart. It's about recognizing the temporary nature of this world and not allowing trivial matters to steal your serenity. Not every comment deserves your response. Not every challenge requires your energy. When your purpose is clear, when your goals are greater, you don't get pulled into every argument. You don't fall into every trap. You protect your peace, not because you are avoiding reality, but because you are focused on a greater reality, the hereafter. And remember, silence in such moments does not mean injustice goes unchecked. It does not mean we allow harm to continue in number. But there is a difference between reacting with emotion and responding with wisdom. A wise response may be calm, delayed, or even silent, but it is calculated, it is driven by purpose, not passion, and it brings about results that are far more lasting and impactful. The believer is not a slave to emotion. The believer is a servant of the Most Merciful, and that servanthood reflects in how they handle conflict. Let's be honest, there will always be people who test us. Sometimes it's the stranger who cuts us off in traffic. Sometimes it's a colleague who speaks without thinking. Sometimes it's family members who trigger old wounds. These moments are inevitable. But each of them is also an opportunity to rise above, an opportunity to earn reward, an opportunity to prove to ourselves that we are not defined by other people's behavior. Just because someone else loses their composure doesn't mean we have to lose ours. Just because someone else chooses harshness doesn't mean we abandon our principles. Each moment of silence in the face of provocation is a seed planted for the hereafter. It is a moment where the angels record your restraint, your sincerity, your patience. And these are the moments that define true character. Not how you act when all is well, but how you act when you are tested, when you are hurt, when you are angry. That is when your true self is revealed. And the one who can be silent for the sake of Allah in such a moment is someone who is walking the path of the righteous. There is another beauty in silence that we often overlook, and that is how silence protects you from deep regret. Many people spend their lives trying to fix the damage done by words spoken in haste. Apologies, explanations, attempts to mend relationships, all because they spoke without thinking. But the one who pauses, who controls their tongue, who remains silent in anger, saves themselves from that pain. They don't need to repair what was never broken. They don't need to apologize for what was never said. And that is a freedom worth more than gold. Now, my brothers and sisters, let's shift our focus to another dimension of silence. The silence that gives you space to listen, to understand, to grow. We live in a time when people talk more than they listen. Everyone wants to speak, but few want to understand. We interrupt, we assume, we rush to reply before we've even fully grasped what was said. But the believer knows that listening is a form of respect. It is a form of humility. It is a gateway to wisdom. When you listen more and speak less, you open your heart to knowledge, to insight, to perspective. You begin to see beyond your own views. Silence creates room for understanding. It allows emotions to settle. It invites others to share. It builds trust. And more importantly, it teaches you the value of reflection. The one who reflects deeply before speaking rarely needs to regret their words. They speak with intention. They choose their words like a jeweler selects precious stones carefully, purposefully, with awareness of their value. And when they are unsure, they prefer silence over risk. The same silence that protects your relationships also strengthens your connection with your Creator. In the stillness of silence, you begin to hear your thoughts more clearly. You become more aware of your intentions. You begin to ask yourself the difficult questions. Why am I saying this? Who am I trying to please? What is my real purpose? And when the answer is not pleasing to your soul, you remain silent, because you know that silence is better than speech without benefit. Silence can be a form of dhikr. When your tongue is not busy with unnecessary words, you can fill it with the remembrance of Allah. You can reflect on His names, His blessings, His mercy. You can whisper quiet du'as. You can let your heart speak to its Lord without distraction. That is a silence that heals, a silence that strengthens, a silence that brings light into your soul. My brothers and sisters, don't let the noise of the world fool you into thinking that silence is weakness. The world may admire loud voices, sharp comebacks, and fiery speeches, but in the eyes of the Most High, the one who controls their speech is honored far more. The one who walks away from conflict is blessed more deeply. The one who chooses silence over ego is given greater peace, and that peace cannot be bought with wealth or earned through fame. It comes only through sincerity, through discipline, through a heart that is connected to its Lord. You will not be questioned on how many times you proved someone wrong, but you will be questioned about how you treated others. You will be asked about your words. You will be held accountable for every sentence that left your mouth. So let your words be few but meaningful. Let your silence be frequent but purposeful. Let your presence speak through your manners, your actions, your calm. So my beloved brothers and sisters, let us learn the art of silence. Let us practice it with intention. Let us recognize that sometimes the strongest voice is the one that chooses not to speak. May our silence be a sign of strength, a symbol of wisdom, and a path to peace in this life and the next. Ameen.